Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Daily Friend Wrap. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Mr. Michael Morris. Let's get into our first point of discussion today. I was browsing through the news looking for stories today, and I caught this opinion column by Professor William Gumede, who I think has been making a lot of very strong contributions to the public debate recently, which I think are really worth paying attention to. And his column is titled, this is on Times Live, "It's not just Earth that are rare, it's also the opportunity dangled before South Africa." And he starts off by saying that a lot of the world is diversifying away from China because there are these fears of conflict between many of the democratic countries, particularly the US and China in the future, and that countries around the world, particularly in Europe, in the US, Japan, Korea, are looking for sources of supplies of various minerals. Now, some of those minerals, particularly rare earths, can be found outside of China in places like the DRC, for example. But South Africa is also a place with a huge amount of mineral resources. But I think the key here is that even though we do indeed have an opportunity to kind of sell to everyone, to boost our economic position, to really create wealth, jobs, and tax revenue, South Africa is not taking advantage of it. And I think this highlights the cost of so many of government's policies to try and micromanage the economy, particularly in mining, which we've seen over recent years, where government will come up with this critical minerals strategy. And they'll say, you see, here's how we're going to leverage the fact that we have all these critical minerals. But then the investment never comes. Michael, what's your takeaway on this one? I mean, do you think I'm right here that we can sort of leverage our I guess, sort of neutrality to our advantage here?
Yes, I think we should be able to, and it's really a crying shame that we aren't doing so, because we are really a society, I suspect not unlike the United States, that is by inclination given to testing risk. We've long been a kind of frontier society. We understand the notion of tomorrow being a potentially risky proposition. This has been the case for 100 years. We've had conflicts. We've had disputes over everything from race to land to resources to language to whatever you can name. It's a South African condition. Never really being sure if the future will work, but in fact staying and taking steps at every step of the way to actually make it work. I think it's in our nature, and we live with risk, and we're quite happy to. It's a curious factor of our society. I think unlike a number of other societies elsewhere in the world, but we require. As in the past under the National Party, now under the ANC, we require our leaders to appreciate that this is a quality we possess, that we can actually be trusted to do this. We can be trusted to be kind of let loose in the marketplace, most specifically. I think South African business has been extraordinarily successful under the most constrained conditions, all the way through the 20th century and now in the 21st, despite all the impediments that are put in the way of the kind of the striving economic players in our economy. They nevertheless produce the goods. Even farmers, I think last year, I think farming contributed the most to our GDP growth. I haven't ever been to the NAMPO expo, but this is apparently quite a thing. But there you go there, and there are people selling these massive machines that are, cost heaven knows how much money. People are investing in these things because they actually do believe in their own future, their own worth, their own hard work, and they are, exercising all these options themselves, despite the fact that there are so many impediments that are being put in their way by bad policy, by hostile government statements and other, other political players making life harder for them. So, the question here again is a really very good case in point. William Gumede is talking about mining. We've written about it for years now. a number of our colleagues have become specialists in this field, Anthea Jeffrey and Terence Corrigan in particular, demonstrating how we are sitting on an absolute gold mine, so to speak, of resources, not gold, obviously, not just gold.
Sometimes literally a gold mine.
Exactly. Masses of resources under the ground, but to get to them, we need to have economic conditions in which miners who have to invest today to hope to gain some kind of advantage in 10 years' time, they need the confidence, they need the certainty that this is worth doing, and that is really what we need to focus on. To remove all the impediments, take the risk. It's a risk that we are asking our political leaders to take. That this is really in fact, history has shown the only way that you stimulate enterprise, you stimulate dynamism, you stimulate the people who've got ideas, who've got money, who've got the will, prepared to work. That's what you want in a society. In a funny way, it's about letting people make money as they see fit, and money is not the only measure of success. And I'm certainly in my own personal book, I'm not a money seeker. I don't think that at all. But what I do understand is that if you allow that in a society, you're allowing a scale of enterprise and a scale of dynamism and a scale of freedom that in fact will even benefit people like me who are not necessarily running after the gold. And that is, you take that risk and you gain immeasurable advantage from it. And I think that's exactly what William Gumede is talking about here.
And we do have the potential to displace a country like Australia as a major mining powerhouse. And we can do that by freeing up some of the regulations, freeing up some of the labor legislation, and stopping the incredible amounts of violence that takes place in our mining sector, where you have, there've been so many examples. Of course, the most infamous being Marikana, where the strikers had potentially been involved in these murders before, and then the police murdered all the strikers. I mean, who's going to invest in a country where that's the climate? But I take your point completely that this is, South Africans are used to risk. We deal with this stuff all the time. We live in a quite risky society, and that gives us a strength that enables us to really succeed if we are set free from the crushing hand of this.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to our next topic. We're continuing to follow the great scandal, which is that on Sunday last week, the Lieutenant General in the police, Mkwanaze in KZN, made allegations that the police minister, Senzo Muchuna, was at the very least covering up for political assassinations in KZN, if not something worse, and that he was connected to various dodgy characters. There's been a big reaction to this from the sort of political body. The DA and MK have laid charges against the police minister, Senzo Muchuna. There's also been comments of concern, I guess you could call them, from people like the ANC Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula. And we were saying yesterday when John Endres and I were talking about this, that the president doesn't really seem keen to talk about this too much. He doesn't seem to be taking any kind of decisive action, despite the fact that this is a crisis of credibility for the police. We need to know who's telling the truth here. You cannot have the police minister accused of such things by a senior cop. Well, President Ramaphosa is apparently an avid listener of the Daily Friend Show, because he has announced that on Sunday night he's going to be doing, one of his what are they called? What's the irritating name that people use for them? Family meetings.
Family meetings.
Yes, that's the very irritating name people use for them. On at 7:00 on Sunday to address the allegations. So, Michael, my question to you is, what should the president say? And I don't know if you have any thoughts on what he might actually say.
Well, a few thoughts arise immediately. The first is, Sunday is quite a while for him. It's a whole week of non-reaction, essentially, from him. I think it's, that tells you something, that he's waited a whole week to say something. If he's going to say it, now, he said he's going to come and speak to the nation. Fair enough. But the most important thing that he should probably bear in mind is that people will know if they are being bullshitted, and there's no way to get around this terribly crude term, but it's a very effective term. He must know that the people are watching, and that they're not going to be placated by all the usual homilies and platitudes. Cyril Ramaphosa is very effective at doing that. I think there have been times when, no doubt, his calming influence has been helpful to the society. But this is not a time where we want platitudes or homilies. We need to know that some kind of decisive thinking is happening. Is he going to investigate? He must tell us what he's going to investigate, what he's going to do. I would suggest that the minister is now so embroiled in this very unseemly, very worrying controversy that probably the most important thing to do might be to dismiss this minister, but certainly to announce a thorough investigation, and with a credible, perhaps a jurist heading some commission, and to deal with it quickly, short time frame. I'm almost hesitant to say all that because, of course, we had the Zondo Commission, and we're still waiting all these years later for a result from that. So, do we really want another one? But we want
it's not just enough to investigate. You also have to follow through with what the investigation says.
Exactly. We certainly want due process. We want it to be fair. The fact that somebody's made accusations doesn't automatically mean that the accusations are accurate or correct. So it's fair enough. We want due process, but we wanted the justice to be seen to be done. It has to be a visible, public, credible process. And if Ramaphosa doesn't live up to those very basic standards, he's going to be on the back foot, and it's going to tarnish him and punish him, I think, also.
I think this is potentially a pretty big political crisis for the ANC.
Yeah.
The police are not a trusted institution. People are, I think, rightly concerned, particularly in the political class for obvious reasons, about political assassinations. Yeah. And, if he's not seen to be dealing decisively with this, it's going to be yet another weight around the ANC's neck. One which all the opposition, everyone from the DA to MK, will be able to exploit. So for his own sake, he needs a decisive response to this.
Exactly.
Not just for the country.
Yeah.
Okay. So in our first story, we talked about freeing people from the shackles of overregulation and letting South Africans win. And here's a kind of example of that actually sort of happening, So there was a lot of controversy when the Competition Commission blocked a merger between Vodacom and a fiber company. This Vodacom was seeking to get the stake in this fiber company to consolidate the internet fiber industry a bit. And what was interesting about this case was this merger was not just obviously supported by the companies doing it, but I believe even MTN, the main competitor of Vodacom, was in favor of this. It seemed to be something that pretty much the entire industry was pretty keen on. Well, the Competition Commission said, nope, no dice. This thing is going to hurt competition. And I think this is a pattern that the Competition Commission has shown in recent years. Massive overreach, overreading of its idea of what competition is or what its role is in promoting competition. And so much so that Minister Parks Tau, in a rare, I think, economic win for the ANC, has let this merger go ahead after he opposed the Competition Commission. And then there was further negotiation, at which point the Competition Commission said that as long as Vodacom and Remgoro Fiber would substantially remedy the competition concerns, they could go ahead with the merger. Well, the minister welcomed the sort of reversal in a statement, and I think this is a good move. This kind of thing needs to go ahead. But Michael, my concern is this: that we're not going to learn the lesson from this. The lesson is there needs to be a re-examination of what the Competition Commission does what its mandate is, what its rules that it's following, what it thinks its role in our economy is. And I don't think that's going to happen. What's your take on this one?
You used the phrase a little earlier, and for the life of me, I can't now remember the context. But obviously the themes are all very similar here. But you used the phrase "the crushing hand of the state," and it's a great risk in South Africa. So here we have an instance, as you say, where there's a potentially positive intervention, but it's very particular. It's a very specific thing. And it might produce some kind of solution in that specific sphere, that sector of the economy, or with the activity involving those particular companies. But what we need is a very similar kind of openness to the kind of flexibility and dynamism of the economy in every case. There needs to be this acceptance that this is actually how you grow the economy. You get economic growth, you develop jobs, enable job creating activity. It's really only by removing that crushing hand of the state and finding ways wherever economic activity is happening to reduce the impediments to people doing what they think is going to be of benefit to their companies. Successful companies are what make successful countries. There just is, there's no way around that. It's a free market is a dynamic, growing, resilient thing that you endow it with these qualities, and off it goes. It's a remarkable thing. The government has enough to focus its attention on: political killings, mafias, crime, potholes, ports. Making things work. And let the government focus on those things, not on the things which, in fact, can resolve their own difficulties by being unimpeded by the state. So I think that, to me, would be really the key thing. There's got to be a general approach, not just a specific solution that one or another company or sector is going to applaud and say, well, this is great. It needs to be generally applied. Yeah.
Then we need to kind of take a broader approach here to reform. It's not just this sort of the minister comes upon down from high and says, "Thou shalt have growth just for your company." We're not exactly sure about those others there. That's exactly the wrong way to go about making things work. And of course, it's not just the sort of top hat wearing, cigar smoking evil capitalists who benefit from growing companies, but the state gets money which it can spend on all those wonderful things you talked about, or even on things like grants and that kind of stuff. And exactly. In South Africa's recent budgets, we see the consequence of the economy not growing, which is that the money is running out. And until the economy grows, the choices are only going to get more difficult for government, not easier. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for listening. We hope you found the show interesting, and we will be back tomorrow with the Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone. The Daily Friend Show and the Daily Friend are a project of the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR. The IRR is a think tank which was founded in 1929 to study race relations in South Africa and works to change government policy to improve race relations through non-racialism and to ensure the prosperity of all South Africans. If you like our work and would like to support us, please go to irr.org.za and click Support the IRR. Or you can go to thedailyfriend.co.za and click the Fund Us button.